The Sony Alpha 1 Mark II is quite literally my dream camera for both photo and video. It's got a bunch of features that I didn't have in previous Sony cameras, like the AI chip, the new autofocus features, we've got the tilty, flippy, twisty screen, and that is just scratching the surface. So being the lunatic that I am, I started to sell things. I sold my A7 IV, I sold a bunch of lenses I wasn't using, some more gear that was collecting dust, and I'm planning on selling my Alpha 1 Mark I, and I bought 2 of them. But hear me out, because by the end of this video, you'll be on my side. You'll understand why this choice made a lot of sense for me. And of course, we'll also talk about the Alpha 1 Mark II and everything that makes this Sony's monster of a flagship camera. So secure the cup and let's get these things out of the boxes to start. Let's just set one of those aside for now. Right in the top of the box, we've got the HDMI clamp. So this allows you to clamp down your cables so that they don't bend around while they're plugged in. We've also got one of the eye cups. So one of the things that they did different with the Alpha 1 Mark II is they actually included 2 different eye cups. One's bigger and squishier, so more comfortable and more kind of light coverage if you're holding it up to your eye. Bunch of documentation that we don't need right now. We've got the classic strap with the logo of the camera on there. So we got a nice Alpha 1 Mark II to show how fancy we are. Of course, we've got the Sony Z or Z battery in here. So it's still using the same batteries as all the other Sony full frame cameras. This I'm quite excited about. So this is a dual battery charger. A lot of Sony cameras don't even come with any battery charger. They just have like USB charging. I'll probably rig this up somewhere in the studio so that I've got quick access to charging extra batteries. This thing's hefty too. Looks like it uses USB-C. I'm interested to see if this charges any faster than any of the third-party chargers that I currently use. Okay, and there's only one thing left in here. There she is in all her glory. I don't think we need to go through the process a second time for this one, so double the fun. So first things first, they definitely do look like a lot of the other Sony cameras, but there are some updates to the body style from anything earlier than the A9 III. So it does have the same body as the A9 III, which means that we've got the nice hefty grip. We've got this kind of slope on the front where we've got our shutter button. The on-off switch is also kind of more embedded, which I'm really looking forward to, because on my A1 Mark I used to accidentally hit the on-off switch all the time when putting it into my bag, and then I would come to it and it would be dead. One of the big things for me coming from the original Alpha 1 is that it only tilted up and down with the screen. This one has the ability to go up, down, or flip around like your typical kind of selfie screen as well. I love when they implemented that on the A7R5, and I'm glad that we see it here. We've also now got a 3.2 inch and 2.1 million dot LCD screen, whereas before it was 3 inches and 1.4 million dots. So we've got bigger and more resolution. We've got the same 9.44 million dot OLED EVF, but now it goes up to 240 hertz refresh rate instead of just 60 hertz like on the original. One of my favorite things that they implemented, I think starting with the A7 IV, is the 3-way switch between video, photo, and S and Q. It makes such a huge difference for getting to a different mode quickly. We've still got the dual CF Express Type A / SD card slot, so you can fit either type of card in there. We've got all sorts of connectivity, so we've got Ethernet, we've got the multi-USB, we've got the flash sync down here, USB-C, full-size HDMI, headphone out, and a microphone in. And we've got a lot of different doors, so you can just open what you need. And just like the Alpha 9 Mark III, we've got an extra custom button down on the front here. So while everything that we're seeing here we have technically seen on other cameras, so mostly on the Alpha 9 Mark III because they share the exact same body, it is exciting from an upgrade perspective. If you're an Alpha 1 Mark I user, this is a huge upgrade. If you're something like an A7 IV user, you're definitely still getting a great upgrade in terms terms of the physical body of this camera. Now, what's new on the inside with these cameras comparatively to the original Alpha 1? We've still got the same 50 megapixel sensor inside these cameras, so that hasn't been upgraded, but it seems like maybe they've been making some tweaks because a lot of the outlets are reporting that it's actually got better dynamic range than the previous version. I don't know if that has to do with processing or what's going on in there, but they've obviously been making some tweaks if it's not identical to the previous. As a user of the FX3, A7 IV, and A1, I've never actually owned a camera that has the AI chip in it. I've reviewed a bunch of them and used them temporarily, but I'm so excited to have that AI chip inside there because I've got the advanced recognition, the human shape and the pose estimation of it, all of the updated autofocus features. So we've got all of the different autofocus modes, plus the A1 is the first camera with an autofocus mode. So you don't actually have to choose between animal, human, animal, human, or bird. Basically you set it in auto and it'll figure out what subject it's actually looking at. We've also now got 8.5 stops of in-body stabilization as compared to the Alpha 1, which was only 5 stops. So I am very much looking forward to having better stabilization in this camera than I'm used to on the Alpha 1 Mark 1. And I did get to test the stabilization and kind of compare it to my Alpha 1 when I went to the launch event for this camera in New York, and it definitely impressed me. We've now got the pre-capture function for photography, so if you're in a burst mode, you can actually get it to record up to 1 second before you hit the shutter by, like, let's say pressing halfway down on the shutter. It'll start buffering photos up to 1 second before you actually hit the shutter. So for wildlife photography, for sports photography, for wedding photography, anything that's happening quickly and you don't want to miss a moment, that is absolutely mint. For video shooters, we've now got Luts that we can load into the camera and use for monitoring. Ever since I got that on my FX3, it's made such a huge difference to the way that I shoot videos, and not having it on my A1 Mark 1 or my A7 IV is always kind of annoying. So I'm very excited to have it on these cameras. We've also got the focus bracketing feature that they added, I believe, on the A7R5. And funny enough, they just put out an announcement that both the A1, A1 Mark II, and the Alpha 9 Mark III are all getting firmware updates. And in that update, the A1 Mark I, the original A1, is going to be getting that focus bracketing feature, I believe, which is kind of annoying as someone who's owned an A1 forever and has wanted that and never had it. There's a lot more reasons why I wanted these, so I'm glad that other A1 owners are getting that now. We've now got the ability to use the boost feature, which is customizing a custom button to boost the burst speed to as fast as you want it to go. And the burst speed of these cameras is still that 30 frames per second that we had on the original Alpha 1. So obviously there's a lot new going on compared to the Alpha 1, but it's not necessarily that we're getting a lot of new features that we've never seen. In fact, almost all the features that I just mentioned, we have on other Sony cameras, and they're just finally now in the flagship camera. So then the question is, why did I choose, and why would anyone choose to buy the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II? Now, honestly, I never actually thought I would buy one Alpha 1 Mark I, let alone two of the Mark II. But as I get further and further in my career in cameras and photography, videography, YouTube, and all this stuff, my needs have kind of grown and the amount of income has grown as well. So getting a flagship camera that has as little compromise as these cameras have starts to make more and more sense. And as an Alpha 1 owner, I've been waiting for this upgrade for a long time, and I absolutely love my Alpha 1. No regrets in going all in when I did with that camera. At the time that I bought it, the Alpha 1 was the no compromise camera. It had all the features that I wanted, and it had the best image quality that I had ever seen in a Sony camera. But as the years went by, Sony obviously started to add more and more features into their other cameras, and I started to kind of feel a little left behind. Things like that AI chip, like I mentioned, all the autofocus features that come from that, the tilty flippy screen, we've got pre-capture, focus stacking function, like all of those things started coming out in these newer cameras. Some of them I probably should have gotten in firmware, but some of them are physical things. You can't just like add an AI chip in an old camera. So similarly to when I bought the original A1, the A1 Mark II, right now, as of January 2025, is the no compromise camera. It's got everything that any Sony camera basically ever has had, with the exception of the A9 Mark III's global shutter and the couple of things that come along with that. So then the next question that you might be asking is, why buy two of them? The kind of first reason is that I have a 3-camera setup. FX3 was my main video camera. My Alpha 1 was my main photo camera. And then I had the A7 IV, which was really my kind of hybrid camera. It could do photos, it could do videos, really the kind of in between. It would be the backup on video day or the backup on photo day. Whatever I needed, it was there as the backup. So basically this camera on my right is replacing my Alpha 1, and then this camera on my left is replacing my A7 IV. It's basically that simple. I'm still gonna have the FX3 and then these two cameras, but the upside of this is that because these cameras are both the same, I'm not gonna have to compromise anywhere by choosing which one I'm using. These are both the best hybrid camera that I could pull out of my backpack at any given time. Now, on top of that, if you've never owned two of the same camera, like had a main camera and then a backup camera, if you're a hybrid shooter especially, it's awesome. First of all, because the layout is exactly the same, you don't have to worry about different buttons in different places like I did with the A1 and the A7 IV. With these two cameras, and nowadays, you can actually copy your settings onto an SD card and just plug it into the other one. So I'll really only have to set up one of these cameras and I can just copy the settings over to the other one. You might even be able to do it on the app nowadays. The other part of that is the consistency of the image output. So for example, before, if I went out with my A1 and my A7 IV and I had, let's say, different lenses on the different cameras and I started taking photos on one or the other, I always had to decide, do I need the 50 megapixel sensor or is the A7 IV 30 megapixel sensor gonna be okay for this shot? Whereas with these two, obviously it's gonna be exactly the same. It doesn't really matter which one I grab, they're gonna look exactly identical. You could load up the two cameras, two of the same cameras with two different lenses, and just grab them as if you're grabbing different lenses instead of having to try and switch lenses, and by that time you've missed the moment. I know you're probably thinking this sounds trivial and like tiny little picky problems, and you're totally right. But at the same time, I run into that issue often enough where I'm out with two cameras or I'm out with only one camera and I've got to change lenses that I miss moments, that having two of the same camera actually makes sense for me as a person who uses cameras every day for his livelihood. Was I able to work with what I had before? Absolutely. Absolutely nothing wrong with what I had before or what I could have got for cheaper or whatever. But is this going to make my life easier and allow me to focus more on what's important and being creative instead of having to think about the technicalities of what camera I have in my hand? Yes. Now, with all that said, I do want to acknowledge that this camera definitely isn't for everyone. I'm not saying that everyone should run out and buy this. It is super expensive. If you're a hobbyist or an enthusiast, or you're just kind of starting to get your feet as someone who's making money with photography or videography, it probably doesn't make sense to run out and just like snap up the Flagship camera. However, for professionals in photography or in hybrid photo video work, this no compromise Flagship camera definitely makes a lot more sense. Or if you just have a lot of money, if you're a hobbyist or enthusiast that wants to go all in and have no compromise like the pros do, then by all means, use my affiliate link. So the question is, what, if anything, is it missing? Well, from what I can think of, I think there's basically two things. It doesn't have the global shutter that we saw on the A9 Mark III, and so you don't have like the unlimited speed flash sync or anything like that. And then the other thing that it doesn't have on the video side is any kind of internal RAW recording like we're starting to see with some other camera brands. And for me, those are both things that I'm willing to live without, considering what I am getting. We've got that 3.8 millisecond readout speed on the sensor, which is insanely fast, and there's so little rolling shutter on this camera that I'm really not worried about not having global shutter. And I don't personally shoot flash stuff, so I don't need that the way that some photographers might. And on the video side, I would argue that a lot of people, myself included, don't need RAW. And I want to emphasize the word need there, because RAW video could be kind of cool, but it's definitely not a necessity. And again, I think that's the emphasis here, is that both of those things that this camera doesn't have are nice to haves, not need to haves. So if those are the only two compromises that I'm making by having this camera, I'm in. So as you can expect, you'll be seeing me making a lot of content with these two cameras. I'm so excited about that. And of course, if you have any questions about them, you can leave that down in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them for you. And I really want to know what you think of the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II. So leave that comment down below if you've got a favorite feature or a least favorite feature, or maybe you think it's a piece of junk. I struggle to know how you could possibly think that, but if you do, I would love to hear about it. Leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.